Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Freedom Factor. So, today, I hadn't planned on doing this, but I saw this video and watched it, and I'm a little dismayed by it. And as you can tell by the title, I'm going to be reacting to and kind of breaking down some things on this video from Jeremy at the Quartering. Now, I will preface this by saying I'm a casual follower of the Quartering. I'm not like a huge fan. I just think some of his takes are a little weird, but he has been consistent with this entire DC Midair Collision episode in just having some. Need I say? I'm trying to be nice about this and not like I'm not trying to take him down and cut him down, but he's had some kind of, for lack of a better term, ignorant takes. Like he just doesn't know what he's really talking about. And that's kind of what it kind of rubs me the wrong way. So we're gonna go through some of what he says here in this latest video. It's titled, and I'll bring it up here. It's titled "Blackhawk Pilot Cover-Up, Army Refused to Release Her Name Until Social Media Could Be Scrubbed." So just the title alone, even if it's not his intention to sound conspiratorial, and I'll get to it in the video what he says, but it's like I I don't hate Jeremy. This is not a bash Jeremy kind of thing. He's had some pretty good opinion on some things. I think he's more kind of Republican leaning. I don't know fully his political ideology, but he is right of center, and he has this habit with his videos of having very clickbaity titles. I don't really. I mean, I guess it gets views. I mean, I don't. Who am I to criticize the guy? I've only got like a few thousand followers on Twitter and very few on this YouTube and Rumble channel. And Jeremy's at 1.8 million subs, so he's clearly a lot more well known than me. So who am I? I'm a nobody, just criticizing. But yet and still, it doesn't detract from the points. So let's get into it, and I'll show you what he's saying. So let's start.
The weekend, there was a lot of weird pressure going on around why the Army had refused to identify the female trainee pilot of that Black Hawk helicopter. Now, whether or not you choose to...
Okay, so first things first. As a former pilot myself, oh boy, where do we get? So we're talking about Captain Rebecca Lobach. She is an Army officer. She's an Army aviation officer. You can't be an Army aviation officer without graduating from Fort Novosel, formerly Fort Rucker, through the pilot training that they do. It's reserved for officers and warrant officers. She had over 500 flight hours, at least. So there's conflicting reports on her total time, but she had, let's just say, approximately 500 flight hours. That is not a trainee. She's not considered a trainee. This was a proficiency flight, so it was basically her flying with a more senior instructor pilot. So Army units have a pool of pilots, and they have designated people who are experienced. They are called instructor pilots, which is what the CW2 was. And forgive me, Chief Eves, I think, or something like that. And so, yeah, she was not a trainee. Point of contention, I know, like Jeremy kind of, yeah. So let's fast forward here. I have some notes on things I wanted to discuss. I believe it was right here.
Will not be released at this time. The unidentified soldier was an experienced pilot with more than 500 hours of flying experience. Again, 500 hours in a helicopter is a lot. It's not that much for a plane, but usually, flights are short in duration. I'm not saying it's a ton, but it's not like she was totally inexperienced. Obviously,
Okay, I have to stop it here. 500 hours is actually a lot of time. On average, a person, my experiences with fixed wing, not helicopter, so I don't know exact on the hour requirements here, but for fixed wing, your average certified flight instructor will have between 300 and 350 hours. That's after they've already obtained private pilot's license, which minimum FAA requirements 40 hours. Usually people don't test for private pilot license. They don't do their check ride till about 60 hours. Then you have your instrument rating and your commercial rating. So that's to be an instructor, a certified flight instructor. That's to work in a job because you have to have a commercial rating to get paid to, fly airplanes. That's just to instruct. And every certified flight instructor I have ever had has been absolutely experienced. Are they the best pilot ever? No. Would I trust them to fly, 777 from, LaGuardia to Paris? Probably not. But that's because they're not type rated in that aircraft and all that. So, Army pilots from Fort Novosel, formerly Rucker, in their individual airframe graduated about 250 hours. That is enough to be considered capable of flying and have them go to their unit. And then that's where they learn, a little more. They fine tune their flying capabilities and they get up to speed with that particular unit's TTPs or tactics, training, and procedures. So she clearly had double the flight hours from when she graduated from the helicopter flight training. So that's a lot of that's quite a bit. That's not like anything to balk at. 500 hours is a lot of experience. Usually in the fixed wing world, pilots, a lot of places will not hire a pilot if they have less than 1,500 hours. But I mean, I've got friends that flew in the military, and they're at like 2,500 hours. And that's after like not a very long career. So Jeremy kind of doesn't know what he's talking about here, which I think is interesting, and we'll get to why in a minute here. But fast forwarding to what's the other part? This part here.
these three troops. Now things are getting pretty curious. Well, let's consider the conspiracies and controversies thickening. Part-time Blackhawk Captain Rebecca Lobach was whose name was being withheld, while her family completely scrubbed her social media accounts. Anti-Trump Biden White House team member. This looks not great. Now,
okay, I'm going to stop it right here. To back up just a little bit here. So, part-time. This part right here kind of rubs me the wrong way. No, if you're in an aviation unit, you are not a part-time helicopter pilot. You are a helicopter pilot. That is your job in a military unit. You may have additional duties, especially, officers always have additional duties. I was not in full disclosure, I was not in an aviation unit when I was in the military. But I do know, I have a lot of friends who were. One of my good friends who flew helicopters in the Army, their job was as a warrant officer, not a commissioned officer like Captain Lobach was. Warrant officer or officers in aviation units will have other duties beyond just flying. One of them will be a safety officer. One of them will be a logistics officer. One of them will be a, procurement officer. Things of that nature. It appears that this individual case, she was some sort of social ambassador to the administration or something. Not unheard of. I mean, they were stationed in Washington, D.C. I believe that they were at Fort Belvoir, which is where they took off out of Davison Army Airfield. So, yeah, she could have other duties, but she was not considered "quote unquote" part time. I mean, you're a Black Hawk pilot. You're you're in an aviation unit, you're a pilot, and you may have other duties. So, yeah. And then he does this picture right here. I don't know the full story. I've seen reports. I'm not going to speculate. I've seen reports that she did work for the Biden administration as a kind of liaison. But this right here, she's in civilian clothing, and she's at the podium in the White House press room. This looks to be kind of a staged thing. Like, so we'll get into it later, but they'll let you do photo ops if you're part of any contingent going to the White House or the Capitol or anything like that. I know plenty of. I have a friend who was stationed at Fort Meade in Maryland on 9/11, and they got to do stuff. And then after 9/11, they did a photo op with the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld. After that, and he's done photo ops at the Pentagon, just in civilian clothes. They were allowed to go over and do photo ops, like take a picture and go, hey, yeah, you can use this as, so this is probably her taking a picture in the press room at the podium for like fun for her social media account. Like, hey, hey, I'll take a question from CNN here in the front. No, that's not abnormal. That's like, this is like for fun. This is a joke. I don't think she was actually there answering questions on behalf of the Biden administration, because as an Army officer, this would probably not be allowed. So I don't know.
She's a
that.
Biden, White House staffer, and she didn't like Trump. I don't think she wanted to crash on purpose, but it is odd that they might want to.
The American Airlines plane.
So, okay, he goes into he plays some news clips. I think partly true. I don't think this picture is accurate to pin the hole. She worked for the Biden administration. There's no evidence she was anti-Trump. She could have been. And you know what? That's allowed. I was in the military. I joined during Bush Jr., and I was in the military during the Obama administration, the first years of the Obama administration. I was not a fan of Obama. I didn't publicly say anything. Granted, this was when Facebook was still pretty new. I didn't really say anything, but I was like, I'm not a fan of Obama. I refrained from saying anything disparaging while in uniform and while representing the U.S. Army. However, I did not say anything positive, unless he did something positive, which, while I was in the military, I didn't see a whole lot of that. But I was also in Afghanistan for the entirety of his first year in office. So, yeah. So we're going to fast forward a little bit more here. I think, here we go. Yeah.
Which is true, but we do have some images. They didn't withhold Rebecca Loebach's name to grieve. They kept it a secret while they scrubbed her social media.
Again, that is complete conjecture. That is just that's just guesswork at this point. They're speculating on that. There's no evidence that they did that.
Here she is at the White House. Nothing wrong with that picture. Nothing wrong with this picture. Here she is at some sort of pride event. Or here she's pictured with people who are in pride clothes. Again, did they want to do that? I don't know. Whoever did this one did a really good job. Often things can be dug up. This time, it's like she never existed. That is odd.
How is it odd? I'm just curious. How is this quote unquote odd for her to have her social media scrubbed? Maybe because of the way politics is today, that if you have an unfavorable opinion of the now current United States president and you're an officer in the United States Army, the family may not want her to be subjected to that. And earlier in the video, and I apologize for leaving this out, I didn't want to harp on this, but the Army, the initial refusal to release Captain Loebach's name was at the request of the family, because it looks to be she was the PIC, pilot in command, of the H-60 that crashed into the CRJ. And I'm sure the family, knowing how contentious political discourse is nowadays, especially after the president, which I think this was completely unprofessional, untoward, and really just a bad look when the first press conference that Donald Trump gives in the event, he goes out and attacks DEI and attacks the previous two administrations, the Biden administration and the Obama administration, and kind of tooting his own horn that the FAA and the ATC community is better under him, because he just got political when this is a tragedy. 64 people lost their lives, and you're politicizing it. I think that was a bad look, but they're saying that the Army withheld at the request of the family, and then was pressured to release because there was a lot of people going, you need to release this information. But I can't blame them. I mean, this poor girl was flying a helicopter that, in error, we don't know. The NTSB hasn't released anything official, so I'm not going to speculate what the proximate cause. I have my suspicions on what the proximate cause is, but she crashed into a passenger jet. Of course, the family's going to be like, "Don't release her name. We don't want it dragged through the mud and people to think what's already happening." And we'll get into it here. We'll play some more here. I believe it's about here.
Again, you see Black Hawk did not follow air traffic controller's route before DC plane crash. This is something that, we basically knew.
Okay, technically, the NTSB did release the other day that the collision happened at approximately 325 feet, give or take 25 feet, because, some of that data is not 100%, just because you have to have a margin of error. But roughly about 325 feet. So yes, technically that section of helicopter route 1-4, depending on how you look at the charts, it's actually helicopter route 1 transition to 4, right there alongside the Ronald Reagan International Airport. Yes, it does have a ceiling of 200 feet AGL above ground level. So if the collision happened at 325 feet, there were at least 125 feet above that published ceiling limit, maximum altitude that the helicopters are allowed to fly along that route on the east bank of the Potomac. But yeah, so we'll continue here.
Early on, now Rebecca Lobox ID'd as a female soldier inside the doomed Black Hawk during the DC crash. Here's a picture of her. Again, women can be pilots. My wife's a pilot. She didn't receive any DEI training. She did the same training as anybody else.
Okay, so his wife's a pilot, yet he's displaying very little knowledge on the topic with his comments about, her being a trainee, or, she was a rated and certified Black Hawk pilot. Obviously, right here is a picture of her in a Black Hawk, probably with her unit out of Fort Belvoir. So she's in an aviation battalion, which, I mean, anybody who knows anything, if you're not in an aviation battalion as a trainee, you're a trainee when you're still at the schoolhouse. But your wife's a pilot, Jeremy, and yet you display very little knowledge on the topic, I guess. I guess that could... My wife's not a pilot. She couldn't tell you a whole lot. I've talked to her about pilot stuff, and she just kind of glazes over. She does not work in pilot realm. So, fair enough. So, cool. Your wife's a pilot. Yeah, let's continue.
Now, it's interesting that this one was withheld, though. You know what I mean? Last month, she escorted Ralph Lauren through the White House when he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. USA reporter and Army vet Davis Winke credited Lobach as instrumental in navigating the hardest periods of his personal life during their time together at University of North Carolina. I wish we'd taken a photo together. I mean, it sounds like people like this girl.
Okay, so if she escorted Ralph Lauren to the White House, for people who don't know, Ralph Lauren is a clothing designer, to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's not atypical to have members. I wouldn't really say members of the military, but have. From what we can gather, I looked at some news reports that she was this social aide for the Biden administration. That's perfectly fine to work for the current administration. I don't know why this is a controversial topic, especially like Laura Loomer of all people, who really kind of has some pretty far off extreme right takes on a lot of stuff. But yeah, okay, so she worked for the administration. She escorted Ralph Lauren. Who cares? Yeah, it's just, we're reaching at this point. It's kind of insane how they're trying to. I like I said, this is exactly why the family didn't want her name released, so that conservative right-leaning outlets wouldn't drag her fucking name through the mud. I mean, Jesus, this woman served our country. Is there any more admirable thing you can do? Serve in the military? She flew helicopters. Every helicopter pilot I've ever met. One of our good family friends is a former Black Hawk pilot. She loves that airframe. Every Black Hawk pilot loves flying. They love the Black Hawk. They think it's awesome. It's great. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to fly helicopters in the Army. That's another time for another story, but they love flying Blackhawks. That they love. That's their job. That's what they wanted to do. That's what they're serving. So let's continue here. He does some other stuff that kind of bugs me here.
For a few days. Now, it is curious to me. You see the third soldier. Last month she escorted Ralph Lauren. Here, Laura Loomer shared this. Rebecca Lobach, the Biden aide, who was flying the helicopter that flew into the American Airlines passenger jet this weekend, attended Pride events. The statement her family released said she was a partner. So maybe she was also LGBTQ.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. All right, let's continue.
Rebecca was many things. She was a daughter, sister, partner, and a friend. She was a servant, a caregiver, an advocate. Most of all, she loved and was loved. Her life was short, but she made a difference in those, everybody who was around her. I don't know. Mostly straights use the term partner.
Okay, I just want to say this right here, this part right here. The helicopter pilot was a social aide to Biden and his degenerate White House, helping to plan his events. She's an Army officer first. She probably was tapped as an additional duty to be an aide, like they asked. It happens. People can have multiple jobs. She wasn't a Biden aide first and a helicopter pilot second, as Laura will say here. Or imply. So that kind of frustrates me a little bit.
Now, I'm not seeing how any of this makes her a DEI hire. Yeah, I still don't really see any information. I do think it's very suspicious. It's very suspicious that if they really did scrub her social media.
Okay, so he admits it here. I'll give him credit that, I don't think she was a DEI hire. Mostly because I don't know how you would do that. I don't know how you would, come to that conclusion. Because she was a female, she was a DEI hire. Like, really? women, like he said, women can be pilots. Yeah, and I know a lot of women. One of my good friends credits when he had his vehicle blown up in Afghanistan, credits a woman with saving his life because she was the one flying the medevac helicopter. So, women can be very capable helicopter pilots. In fact, some of them have gone on to do some pretty incredible things. So, all right, let's continue.
It is curious, but there seems to be no indication. Female pilot in crash was blamed on DEI, was a top 20% Army cadet. Top 20% isn't exactly anything to write home about, but it's certainly not somebody who sucked.
Okay, time out again. This is where Jeremy's ignorance just... Top 20% is pretty freaking good when I'm not an expert on this, but from all the information I could gather, usually the flight training classes are about 20 individuals, usually not more. Top 20% would mean she was in the top 4. For crying out loud, Jeremy, come on. Top 20% is not much to write home about. Actually, yeah, it is. Top 20% is pretty damn good when your class is only 20 people. Sometimes less, but, I mean, come on. If you're in the top 20% of anything, really, that's not a bad thing. I would write home about it. I was certainly not in the... I was definitely in the top 20% of my AIT class graduating in the Army. I was definitely in the top 20% when I graduated the Law Enforcement Academy in terms of shooting and driving. I was in the top 20% of those two categories. That was something that I was proud of. So I don't know what Jeremy's trying to imply here, that's not something to write home about. Okay.
So, as this, we probably kind of put a pin in this. There doesn't seem to be, there is some suspicion if they really did scrub their social media. You see that this was reported by a few different people. I think Financial Times wrote this, or Economic Times wrote the cause. They deleted Rebecca Loback's social media accounts before releasing her name. It wasn't to grieve, one user claimed. They didn't withhold her name to grieve. They kept it secret while they scrubbed her social media. Another suggestion, right-wing commentator Lauren Loomer further fueled speculation, claiming that she was a Biden aide who attended Pride events. So yes, DEI was very much in the crash. Trump was right. She wrote, implying Loback's orientation played a role. Another post referred to...
Okay, so... President Obama overturned Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy that had been in the Army for a very long time, or the DOD for a really long time. Relevance. Like I said earlier, scrubbing her social media, if that's indeed what happened, it was probably to hide stuff like that would show her in a light favorable to the left. Because, yeah, there's probably potential that she was LGBT. So if Captain Lobach was gay, they could say, oh, DEI. Again, objection, Your Honor, on the grounds of relevance. Gay people can operate within the United States military very well. I was friends with several people who were homosexual in the Army. One of them was a good friend who was a medic, he was probably one of the better medics I've ever known. We had truck drivers that were gay. They did a perfectly acceptable job. That in no way detracts from a person's abilities to do their job. And this part-time Black Hawk pilot, no. Just no, you people are so wrong on this. So wrong. Okay, so I guess here it was saying she graduated in the top 20% of the Army Officer Training Corps and was selected as a White House social aide. And yeah, she began her military career as an aviation officer. So I'm sorry. You're in the 12th Aviation Battalion, and you're a aviation officer. You're a pilot. Period. You may have, like I said, you may have other duties, but you are a pilot. You're not a part-time pilot. You are a full-time aviation officer. She was active duty. I don't see anything about her unless she was not active duty. She was the company XO in the 12th Aviation Battalion, which means so she probably didn't fly nearly as much as like lieutenants did because, you know, the XO is like the second in command of the company. You have the company commander and then the company XO. Those are the two highest ranking officers within a unit. And then, of course, you'll have like for a company, they'll have like an enlisted first sergeant who's the highest ranking enlisted man in the company. But I mean, so she may have filled out other roles, but she was a pilot. And the whole thing about, yeah, scrubbing the social media so that goddamn goons like Laura Loomer don't come in and speculate that because she was her sexual orientation, they're saying, implying that her sexual orientation played a role. No, it did not. Your sexual orientation does not play a role in your capabilities as a pilot. Period. And that is the most absurd, ridiculous, and ignorant thing I've ever heard relating to this. All right, let's finish this video. Let's see what he says at the end here.
Who was a part-time pilot, alleging her family had scrubbed her anti-Trump social media posts before the announcement. I mean, I've seen no evidence of that, so how would you know? You know?
Thank you. Okay, there we go. He said he's seen no evidence, so how would you know? I agree with that. Yes, thank you, Jeremy. Yeah. It probably also part of it was to, if they did, in fact, and, you know, we're done with this. I'll close with this because this is a little bit longer than I intended, but gosh, this really kind of gets under my skin as a veteran and as a rational libertarian who I hate this identity politics bullcrap that people will pull, especially with Laura Loomer. Like, I would challenge her to, you know, to just like, I would challenge her like intelligence to like her worldview on, you know, I guarantee you there's a lot, I guarantee you, I can almost promise you, Laura Loomer has probably flown on a commercial airliner that was piloted by someone who was gay. I guarantee it. And guess what? They are just as capable. But the whole like, okay, so if they did, let me just close with this. If they did scrub her social media to remove anti-Trump posts, that's probably one. We had a guy in my unit who had said some things about Obama on his social media, and he was counseled by one of my cohorts, one of the NCOs in my unit. This guy was pulled into an office because we'd found it, and we're like, hey, this is your social media says that you're a soldier in the United States Army, and here you have a post that's trash talking your commander-in-chief, the president of the United States. It does not matter. You like, there's no being in the military. It doesn't mean you have to like the president. Let me get that out of the way. You don't have to love the president in the military. However, you do have to respect the office. And with that respect, you should not be publicly disparaging them. Sure, if you want to, you know, you're having a beer with your dad and you want to say, gosh, you know, president I really don't like this president. He's kind of a dirtbag. Kind of doing things I don't agree with. Kind of sucks, you know, serving under this administration. I really don't like it. That's fine. That's your opinion. You can say that. But once you publicly, as outwardly representing the United States military, That is like, that's a no-no. That's kind of viewed as insubordination. And they probably did this so that there wouldn't be accusations of her being insubordinate to the commander-in-chief, who was 9 days earlier sworn in as her commander-in-chief, as the president of the United States. She was probably bitter because she probably lost her aide position with the White House, and said, "Hey, take your ass back to Fort Belvoir. You're going back to just being your company XO. Go fly helicopters," and there you go. And probably to erase any negative consequences. I mean, had someone probably would have hinted to her if this accident never happened, like, "Hey, Rebecca, you should probably like take down your anti-Trump posts, because that guy's your boss now, and you're an officer who is, one of your responsibilities as an officer is to carry out the orders of the president. And if you don't like the president and all that, it could be negative consequences." So I'm assuming this was an instance where the family was trying to alleviate any negative consequences and to shield her from, like I said earlier, having her name dragged through the mud. Look, I don't agree with her opinions. Yeah, sure, pride, who cares? Like, people are allowed to have a life. People are allowed to belong to communities. Even in the military. Don't ask, don't tell is not, like, reimposed. Yeah, Trump said, like, trans people can't serve, but hey, that didn't mean that this girl was going to get, her commission revoked because she was potentially whatever. I don't even know. I'm not even going to speculate. If she was a lesbian, who cares? It has no bearing on her capabilities. Now, with the crash, there's a lot of speculation. Okay, so there's a high likelihood that she deviated from the ceiling. I've heard reports that happens a lot. It doesn't excuse it at all. They should probably, tamp down on that. They should probably put it in their briefings and say, "Hey, do not break that 200-foot ceiling. Period." It's like a violation. At the very least, anybody who does that should be counseled on it. If not, if repeated, they should get like a letter of reprimand in their file and stuff like that. Or at worst, flight status revoked, whatever. But it has no bearing. Her sexual orientation has no bearing whatsoever on any of this. It doesn't mean she was less capable. And it just pisses me off that the right has latched onto this, that gay, lesbian, trans, whatever you identify as somehow makes you less qualified. That's complete garbage. Yes, I understand, and I will probably do a video on this, on DEI and how DEI has ruined the perception of things. Because in short, just the existence of DEI calls into question people's qualifications and capabilities. Because if you see somebody, who is a minority in a position, because of the existence of DEI, it presents this perception that possibly it presents doubt. Did they get the job because they're a minority, or did they get the job because they're qualified to get the job? And so that's my big complaint against DEI. It's not against representation. I don't care. I've worked both in law enforcement, military, aviation, what have you, every career I've ever had. I've worked with people of all different races, all different nationalities, all different backgrounds, gender identity, or, sexual orientation, all of that. And I mean, those superficial categories do not disqualify somebody from being able to hold that job. That's all I'm going to say. So on this, look, I'm glad that Jeremy this is not to bash Jeremy. It's not to lambast him and say that he's a terrible person or he's an idiot. Not saying that at all. I'm just saying some of his commentary has been a little from a position of lacking knowledge and experience. And that's okay. People don't know everything about everything. I don't know diddly squat about basketball. So you know what I do, though? The difference between me and him, you know what I do? I refrain from discussing the NBA. Because I don't know diddly about basketball. Okay? I know Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time to ever play. But that's it. I don't know anything else. So I don't talk about it. But the whole thing, this whole fiasco with it does, yes, the refusing to release her name for a period of time does kind of feed into the speculation. And I think that this incensed kind of title for this video, where it's very clickbaity, is inappropriate. But it's what Jeremy does. It's why, I guess it's why Jeremy has 1.85 million subscribers, and this video that's 23 hours old has 134, almost 800,000, or 134,799 views. Gosh, I can't talk. I guess that's why he has the following he has. But yeah, dude, like, the insinuation, it's just ridiculous. Look, people died. It is very sad. It's a tragedy. My heart goes out to every single victim, every one of their families, the families and the 12th Aviation Battalion, all the people who served with these, from everything I can gather, these very honorable, well-serving, patriotic Americans, these American soldiers that ultimately they served. They gave their lives for their country, in service to their country, and that should be respected above all else. I don't care if Captain Lobach was, LGBT or any of that, because she served the country that she loved, and that is admirable. And it's a tragedy that they died. And I think we should recognize that instead of playing this stupid bullshit politics game. So I've run way longer than I intended, but hey, thank you. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. Leave a like, subscribe. It helps the channel out, and comment. How do you feel about this? Do you think it's appropriate to politic on a tragedy like this? I don't. I will say I voted for Trump. I do not support Trump's comments about surrounding this tragedy. I felt like I watched his, and you could go Google it. It's bad. I did not like it. I was not pleased. His press conference following this accident is just beyond the pale. I was like, dude, no. That very unprofessional. I felt like it was completely uncalled for. And see, I will give criticism when Donald Trump does things like that. So, yeah, I'm not partisan. That's why I love being libertarian, because I'm not beholden to the Republican line, and I will call Trump out when he makes mistakes. So, anywho, stay tuned. I'll try and get some more content out next week or later this week. Other than that, thanks for tuning into the Freedom Factor, and have a great day.